Welcome back to another reflection video of SCOTOMAVILLE. This one is on Strengths Offender, and it is Volume 1, Episode 13. And the soaring hat is in celebration of having watched
Did you
that
hear
video
yourself?
Yeah.
with Angelina, as you'll see in a moment.
Is that yours?
What comes to mind in looking back on this is not that strengths need to be tossed, thrown, omitted. They're not even that they should be throttled much, but rather you'll still be you. You will continue fixating, but with awareness. You'll continue doing the things that make you you, but you'll be observant of it. And you'll see it in others. You'll see that when someone else has a platform, has a position, and they abuse that by talking down or omitting facts and telling a narrative that misleads or redirects or in many ways betrays their oath. Could not have imagined we'd be having open borders, fentanyl crisis, inflation, discord, tensions, all of these things going on where it's easy to not feel safe anymore because it's not what it used to be even 3 years ago. And I say that for the record, not sure that I'm going to include that. But it's easy to see the spin when you identify strengths. And when you see someone who has a position and a responsibility, and they either abuse or neglect it, becomes blatant. And yeah, it's troublesome.
In real life situations. So if I'm going to go take the trash out, it's not that I'm going to quote blow off steam, or I'm trying to figure out what's at the root of
my intention is to convey the understanding that over time you'll not lose your strengths, but they will not be as offensive because you'll recognize both your tools and your opportunity, and you'll take it a bit more seriously. I'm just coming up on 60,000 views of my videos on my YouTube channel. And that's not enormous, but it's something. That gives me an opportunity to recognize the value in the things that I say. So as you'll hear in much later episodes, Stuart Varney says that history is a great teacher if you're paying attention. So the reflection videos are an excellent opportunity to pay attention. So is history. Take a few moments, do the hard thing, look up Nero and see how his dynasty fared and how the behavior that he took in his position and what outcome it came to. We're hoping for that in the next couple of months, things to be corrected. But also to say, my achiever learner is still appreciated. I geeked out for a couple of hours with David Deutch last night. He's come about with a team trying to explain a scotoma I was geeking out because it was really satisfying, affirming the entire SCOTOMAVILLE series. That in fact, the story we tell ourselves does direct our outcomes.
Over the centuries since the scientific revolution, one thing that hasn't changed very much is the mode of explanation of our fundamental laws. So, for example, if we see a comet in the sky and can measure where it is and which direction it's going and how fast, we can use the laws of motion to tell us where it will be at any other time in the future. But sometimes that question is not the one we want the answer to. Sometimes we don't want to know necessarily where the comet will go if nothing gets in the way. We want to know where it can be made to go given certain resources such as rockets, fuel, and most importantly, knowledge. That is the sort of question that is addressed by constructor theory.
Now, information is essential both in science and in everyday life, even more so now that we live in a world where there are billions of computers all interconnected with one another. What does the existence of information tell us about the laws of physics? Well, in constructor theory, we can answer this question exactly in what we call the constructor theory of information. And with that theory, we bring information directly into fundamental physics. Information is very different from anything else we have in fundamental physics. It's not an observable, it's not like the velocity or the charge of a particle, and it somehow transcends the physical systems that contain it. Just think of a message, for example. It can be embodied in the transistors within a computer. It can be spoken aloud in vibrating molecules of air, and it can even be instantiated in the flags of an air traffic controller. And yet, the meaning of the message stays the same.
You can't see information in a physical object unless you also know how the object could have looked if it had had other information in it. And that is called the counterfactual property of information. And it is easy to express in constructor theory because constructor theory is all about what is possible and impossible. And the only other thing that's needed is that the information, when it's received, can be distinguished by the recipient from all these other possible ways it could have been, and also passed on to other recipients. And that means it has to be copyable. Now, these two properties of information, the counterfactual property and the copyability, are both easy to state in constructor theoretic terms and without referring to any particular type of physical system. The very next step, which involves imposing a condition that's very natural in constructor theory, leads directly to all the most important properties of quantum information, which is at the heart of the new and rapidly growing field of quantum technology.
So the constructor theory of information expresses the regularities in the laws of physics that permit the existence of information in our universe. These regularities permit things like computation, communication, and even the existence of living organisms, which evidently contain information about their own design. And all these regularities can be expressed exactly in terms of possible and impossible transformations. And this is why constructor theory suddenly opens the doors to these concepts and brings them directly into fundamental physics.
A DNA molecule is an information storage and retrieval device. And so is a computer drive that holds something like the design of a new iPhone. Now, these two objects, the molecule and the drive, are physically very different. They have in common that they both hold information, But it's information of a special kind, the kind that can cause transformations in other objects much larger than themselves. And we call that kind of information knowledge.
Living things are made of atoms, just like galaxies, planets, or rocks. But unlike these, living things look much more like designed objects, such as cars, robots, or iPhones. That is to say, it must be capable of constructing another instance of itself with high accuracy. Self-reproduction and replication are the basic mechanisms of life. Their accuracy is so remarkable that some physicists have been wondering how they can occur with such an accuracy under simple laws of physics. Constructor theory explains that they can and why. An accurate self-reproducing bacterium must contain a recipe, a sequence of elementary instructions to construct the bacterium. And that's the fundamental thing that a bacterium has in common with, say, an iPhone factory. For the factory, the recipe is the program that contains the design of an iPhone. For the bacterium, the recipe is the DNA sequence. And self-reproduction happens by copying the recipe in the DNA sequence and by reconstructing the rest of the cell by executing the recipe step by step. And one such step that is crucial for high accuracy to be achieved is error correction. Error correction for the bacterium is when anything that has gone wrong in the copy of the recipe is corrected. And for the iPhone factory is quality control, when faulty end products are discarded. Without error correction, an error catastrophe would occur. And this is because both the bacterium and the iPhone are highly complex structures. Displace one small bit and nothing works anymore, which is why things like viruses that don't use error correction must stay simple under our laws of physics.
Knowledge is central to constructor theory. That's because the basic principle of constructor theory is that any transformation that isn't forbidden by the laws of physics is possible. And that means that it can be performed in practice given only enough knowledge.
So constructor theory can let us understand how knowledge and knowledge-creating systems, such as humans, work.
Constructor theory draws its fundamental distinction between transformations that are possible and those that are impossible.
I was geeking out because it was really satisfying, affirming the entire SCOTOMAVILLE series. The story we tell ourselves does direct our outcomes. And so it's extremely important for you to understand the different facets of your beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors, both where they came from, where they're going, and for you to be able to direct them with your internal dialogue. And as Angelina has to admit, it's working well. I am, in fact, getting my butt out of SCOTOMAVILLE. With that, I'll leave you to do a little bit of homework. See you next episode.